Welcome to College Smart Radio, helping you understand the true cost of college and tackle the runaway costs of financing a college education. College Smart Radio is hosted by Mark Guthrie and Beatrice Schultz, founders of Westface College Planning. Now, your hosts for College Smart Radio, Mark Guthrie and Beatrice Schultz.
Students and their parents who are bankrolling their kids' education are often amazed to learn that they can afford an undergrad education outside of their home state. Thanks to a program called WICHE, out-of-state education is an affordable possibility. Our guest on today's College Smart Radio program is Margo Colalancia, Director of Student Exchange Programs at WICHE, who oversees 3 of their major programs, including the WICHE program. Hi, I'm Beatrice Schultz. I'm here in the studio on my own today because my co-host, Mark Guthrie, will be back. Is out of town this week, but will be back next week. Welcome to our weekly show, College Smart Radio, where we help you tackle the runaway costs of a college education. Our show is about bringing up-to-date and practical advice to parents who are dealing with the cost of a college education for our kids, with some private schools costing well over $60,000 a year and a UC costing $35,000 and a California university running $25,000. Parents need more help than ever. We bring you that help by sharing ways to pay less, tapping into financial aid, and prioritizing your source of funds to make sure you get through the most expensive years of your life. Based on our education and experience, we share our insights with you week in and week out. Mark and I are the owners of the San Carlos-based college financial planning business, Westface College Planning, and we're also the owners of Westface Financial Advisory, a registered investment advisory firm. We host workshops and webinars on college and retirement financial planning and consult with parents on a daily basis. And in addition to our insights, we bring in experts in many areas of the college process, from counselors, financial professionals, financial aid officers, student coaches, parents, and even students. You'll learn firsthand the ins and outs of how to pay for college and survive financially. In addition to our show, you can find lots of powerful information at our website, collegesmartradio.com. We have many articles with up-to-date information on navigating the waters of paying for the runaway costs of college. We also have a monthly e-newsletter full of content about college planning, and we have a link to our free community parent workshops and webinars that we host to teach parents about how to pay for college and how the financial aid system really works. So let's get into today's show. My guest on today's show is Margo Colalancia, who directs the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education's 3 student exchange programs: the Professional Student Exchange Program, the Western Regional Graduate Program, and the Western Undergrad Exchange Program, which provide a broad range of higher education options for some over 35,000 students. Margo, welcome to College Smart Radio.
Thank you for having me, Beatrice. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for joining me. I'm sorry I butchered your last name. I'll correct that as I go through it. Nice Italian name. So let's start. Tell me, what is WICHE and what is WICHE?
So WICHE is a nonprofit higher education organization. It's a Western compact. It was founded in 1953, and several of the Western states got together and said, why don't we share higher education resources? We can do things better together rather than separately. And so they formed this compact. The member states, they are basically from the Rocky, if you take the Rocky Mountains and include the states that the Rocky Mountains pass through, so those states plus everything west of them, and then North and South Dakota also joined the organization. So we've been around actually for 60 years.
Yeah, and that definitely. So how many states is that? How many of the states does it cover, the WICHE program?
So that's 15 states, 15 Western states, and recently the U.S. Pacific Territories joined. So now the residents of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands are also eligible for the WICHE exchange programs.
Okay.
Just that particular island group.
So we're going to talk today mostly about the WICHE, which is the undergrad exchange program, but can you just give us a minute to explain what the professional student exchange program is and what the Western Regional Graduate Program is?
Sure. The professional student exchange program actually was the reason that WICHE started 60 years ago. So many of our Western states didn't have programs in the professional medical fields. So, for example, the state of Wyoming, let's take them for an example, very small population. All they have is a farm. They don't have a medical school. They don't have a dental school, for example. So some of the states, for example, California and Colorado, did have schools in that area. So they said, well, why don't you send your Wyoming residents to our schools and provide some additional funding for the students to help discount their seat, and we'll take them. Actually, the state of California hasn't sent any students through the Professional Student Exchange Program, but they do receive students, about 70 students a year, to the tune of $2 million in additional student support for their tuition from other WICHE states.
Okay, and that's a good point. We'll talk a little bit about that, kind of the receiving end and the giving end. And most of our listeners are from California, but we do broadcast this over the internet, so we do have listeners across the U.S. and definitely the other Western states. So real quickly, the Western Regional Graduate Program, is that just specific graduate programs that may not be available in the state also?
Exactly. Well, the student, even if there is a similar program in their home state, they can still use that. And we have quite a few California residents using our WRGP program. It's the Western Regional Graduate Program. So it's master's and PhD and graduate certificates in specific. So, for example, a California student could come to a program in, let's say, Idaho, and they would pay, it's actually better than WUI, it's resident tuition instead of 150%.
Oh, that's great. Well, so now we've got all of our listeners intrigued. What's the difference and what exactly is WUI? So let's talk a little bit about WUI, the program for undergraduates, and how it works.
Sure. So WUI is a multilateral regional tuition reciprocity program. So, for example, the student's home state doesn't have to send any additional money for the student to be admitted in a participating institution. It's basically the student tuition dollars, and the savings is huge. Students, instead of paying, for example, a California resident going to, let's say, Arizona, a public institution in Arizona, would pay 150% of resident tuition of the receiving institution instead of the full non-resident rate.
And I think that's really great for our listeners to understand, because sometimes I'll hear people say to me, oh, WUI, that means that I get to, or I understand there's a scholarship where I can pay in-state tuition. And it's not exactly paying in-state tuition, but we'll talk a little bit about the comparisons and the fact that some of the other costs are lower in some of these other state schools, so it can still be a less expensive or equivalent education for California. So thanks for sharing that. So you said that that's sometimes the case, so not every school would always be 150, or is 150 the formula for all the WUI exchange?
It is a formula. So it's 150% of tuition, and then we would add the fees on top of that.
Okay. So the fees would be the same for in-state and out-of-state, or would an out-of-state student pay more for fees?
Typically, they would be the same.
Okay. So the formula, but the fees are not. So in some ways, actually, that would be better, because the fees would not have the 150% or the 50% added. So let's talk a little bit about who is eligible to get this WUI scholarship. And is that the right term? It's really considered a scholarship?
Some people call it a scholarship. Sometimes we call it a tuition discount. So it's got various names. The big thing is that it's savings. So
yeah.
It's an important thing. But as far as eligibility, so if you reside in a WICHE member state, and like I said, it's the 15 states plus the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, you are automatically eligible. It doesn't mean that it's a given that you'll get it for sure, but you are eligible to apply for the scholarship.
And so being eligible, I guess the second thing you said, which is it doesn't mean you're going to get it. So you apply, and let's talk a little bit about what would make you eligible. Other than living in those states, you also do need a basic grade point average, or is that only some schools that require that?
No, they do have a minimum grade point average requirement. Also, some minimums on the college admissions test, the ACT or the SAT, the ACT or the SAT. And in addition, you don't have to demonstrate financial need, which is great for most families. And you also, I guess the big thing is you have to make sure that your major is eligible, because not all of our institutions lay out all their majors, make all their majors available at the discounted rate. And some of the commonly excluded majors that we see are high-demand ones by the home state residents. So, for example, nursing, kinesiology, psychology, dental hygiene, radiology. Those are some of the ones that we often see excluded.
Okay, so A lot of undergrad kids, when they're applying to college, are not declaring a major when they're applying. So with these colleges, would it be possible that you could apply without declaring a major and you could lose out on the scholarship? Or if you don't declare a major, are you still considered?
So it depends on the institution. I think quite a few of them will allow an undeclared student, but just for a message for students to beware that if they do change majors and roll over to one of those excluded majors at the institution where they're at, they may end up paying full fare from the time that they declare an ineligible major.
Well, that's a great question, or that brings me to another question, which is, once they qualify for this scholarship as an incoming freshman, is it a scholarship that's guaranteed for the 4 years they're there, or do they have to keep a certain GPA or any other requirement? I understand you just said the major has to be kept, but any other requirements
Sure.
to keep that?
Yes, there are. They have to remain in good academic standing, and that's defined by the enrolling institution. So, and I guess the other thing to keep in mind is typically if they're enrolled in a bachelor's program, they would get a maximum of 4 years at the discounted rate.
Okay. And
I know a lot of students are taking 5 to 6 years to finish, so this is an incentive to study fast and furiously and finish within 4 years.
It certainly is. And is it, if students take summers, like California student would take a summer school at, let's say, Portland State, do you know if they would also get a discounted rate on that summer tuition, or would they expect they'd have to pay full? Any ideas or any guesses?
That I'm not sure of that detail. It varies by institution. So the student really should check with the institution and see whether summers are included or not.
I think it's good to think about, though, for our listeners, that it's really important along the way, and we talk about that often on our radio show, which is you want to graduate as quickly as you can, and often, even if you do pay more for those classes in the summer, if you do have to, it's cheaper than thinking about the whole cost of going back to education for that 5th year, and for sure you're not going to get the WICHE scholarship then.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing I want to point out too, Beatrice, is that a lot of our institutions have set caps on the number of WICHE discounts that they can give out each year for new students. So the sooner you apply, the better off you are. Because if, let's say, for example, 50 is their limit for a particular year, and you walk in the door and you're well qualified, but you're 51, then you could be shut out, and that would be a shame. So we really encourage students to get their applications in early.
That's a great recommendation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back right after the break. If you've just joined us, our guest on today's College Smart Radio program is Margo Colalancia, and she is the Director of Student Exchange Programs at WICHE. We'll be right back in just a couple of minutes on College Smart Radio.
College Smart Radio with Mark Guthrie and Beatrice Schultz continues in moments on AM 1220 KDOW. For more information on today's topic, visit collegesmartradio.com or call area code 650-587-1559. Contact our hosts at collegesmartradio.com or call 650-587-1559. Now back to College Smart Radio with Mark Guthrie and Beatrice Schultz on AM 1220 KDOW.
Welcome back to College Smart Radio, where we help you tackle the runaway costs of college. I'm Beatrice Schultz. We all know that college is expensive and will most likely be some of the most costly years for a family. Understanding how to navigate the college costs is a very smart thing to know. To help families be on this radio show, we host community workshops live and via webinar several times a month that explain the costs of various colleges, how the financial aid system works, and things to consider to prepare yourself for this tremendous expense. To learn more and reserve your seat, go to my website at collegesmartradio.com. If you've just joined us, we've been talking with our guest, Margo Colalancia, who's the Director of Student Exchange Programs at WICHE. We've been talking about the WIWI program, and one of the things right before I cut you off, Margo, you had said that it really, typically the schools have a limited number of WIWI scholarships that they offer, and so it is truly on a first-come, first-served basis for eligible students. Is that correct?
That is correct. So the sooner they apply, the better off.
Okay, so for all our listeners, it's a good reason to apply early to college. So let's talk about, you probably have some research, or you guys get this question, how much does the average WIWI student save?
The average WIWI student this current academic year is saving about $7,800, But the range is, there's quite a range, actually. So a student, for example, going to a community college in a more affordable state might save only $900 a year, but that's still nothing to laugh at. And some students, depending if they go to a higher-priced institution, a public institution in the West, might save up to $13,000 just in one academic year, which is pretty phenomenal.
Which is phenomenal because, as we said, we're going to be there for 4 years and hopefully not longer. But that's a big deal. And even as you said, that $900. I mean, a lot of us would be happy if our students get a summer job that would bring $1,000 into the college budget, so that's worthwhile.
Most definitely. And I just want to note too, Beatrice, I mean, just the exchange just this year is saving parents and students and families $264.7 million, and that's for about 34,000 students across the western U.S. So it's a very big program.
It's a very big program, and it also opens up because we're comparing that, I'm assuming, to a public institution in the state, but there's quite a bit of savings over thinking about going to a private institution also. So the numbers are big and they're real. So the institutions are discounting their tuition. Why are they doing it?
Well, there's several motivations. I mean, they're trying to reach some enrollment goals. And first and foremost, sometimes they have majors that might be not as popular with their home state residents. So it's a way to attract very competitive students into their state. These students coming from other states are going to have, they'll attract diversity, both ethnic and regional. They'll get better perspectives, which will make a richer learning experience for the whole student body. And they also, some states look to it, to the program to help build their local workforce. So they may have shrinking populations right now, and they're looking to fortify their workforce. So if they get some good students in, students graduate from there, they may meet somebody while they're, getting their education and decide to stay in that state and become part of the workforce. So those are the primary motivations for an institution to participate.
So most of my listeners are in California. How many California residents are using WICHE?
It's huge. You guys are actually the bulk of the enrollment as far as the outbound numbers. So this year there were almost 14,000 California residents. So that's 14,000 out of the 34,000. And just the savings to the California residents alone was $122-some million just this year.
That's a pretty powerful number, and I think that speaks to the fact that many California residents have discovered that this is an affordable way to get an education, and also an interesting one, because the California residents also get the benefit of going to school outside of their local state. So where are most of them studying? I mean, are there specific institutions that have most of the colleges? Actually,
the Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff is a very popular destination for California residents. University of Nevada, Reno is also very popular. Hawaii, no surprise, University of Hawaii at Manoa, Southern Oregon University, and also the University of Nevada at Las Vegas. So I'd say those are the top 5 destinations for California residents right now.
Well, that kind of leads to another question, which is, and I think I introduced the show with it. Is it cheaper to use WICHE and study outside of California versus staying inside California? And I think the answer is yes, in fact, more so for those 4 colleges that you mentioned. But let's talk a little bit about what would make the cost of education cheaper, because you're paying 150% of tuition.
Yeah, it's surprising, but oftentimes it is about the same cost, or maybe in some instances lower cost than staying in state. And so it really depends on what where you're going and where you would have gone in your home state. For example, if we take a UCLA tuition this year, it's running around $11,000. But many of our WICHE state WUI rates this year are between $5,000 and $10,000, even at the 4-year institution, the bachelor's level.
That's a great comparison. And then the other side of it, because whenever we talk about college, we really talk about the total cost of tuition, the total cost of attendance, and room and board's a big part of it. And all those, Southern Oregon, Reno, Las Vegas, Northern Arizona, these are all areas that the room and board is quite a bit less expensive, either to live on campus or off campus, which also helps for the overall cost. And that's one area for sure you can save if you could save in both the tuition and the room and board.
Exactly. That's a very good point. In North and South Dakota, Montana, I think those states, Wyoming as well, the cost of living is much lower than in California.
And actually, it's true. When we think about the only states we really think about being more expensive are those New York State, California. Unfortunately, it's got one of the highest room and board. So probably compared to maybe Hawaii would be more expensive. I'm not sure, but
Hawaii is quite expensive.
Hawaii is quite expensive. So we've talked about kind of the main factors about the WUI, and let's just review them real quickly. So you need to apply directly to the institution, and I often have students who are like, well, how can I apply for this WUI scholarship? So you definitely need to apply directly to the institution. Now, where can a student go to find out if their student offers WUI scholarships and what majors they may need?
Sure. We have a WUI website, so if you go to www.wiche.edu/WUI, WUE, and on there, we have a bunch of profiles of our participating institutions. We have 154 institutions that participate. About half of them are community colleges. The other half are four-year institutions. And you can get details on who to contact at a particular institution. A lot of them have their own applications online, so you can link to those as well. You can find out what their deadlines are, what their minimum GPA requirements are in SAT or ACT scores, and then you do apply directly to them. So many times you'll go through the admissions office. In some instances, you'll deal with their scholarship or their financial aid office.
And that WICHE website will be available on our College Smart Radio website for any of our listeners who want to click on the link there. And also, Margo's provided a blog discussing the WUI options and how the WUI scholarships work, and that will also be available on our website. So just before we go, I just had we didn't talk about it, and I want to talk about the community college, using the scholarship for community college. Can you tell me really quickly, tuition's not huge for community college, so is it worth it? I mean, do you find there's a fair amount of kids who are coming from California to go to community college in Oregon or Nevada?
We do have actually quite a few that use WUI for community colleges. I think it's because they were kind of shut out of the California system because there's such high demand right now. So, but I know that the community college in California is very, very, very affordable. So you're not going to find anything as affordable in the WICHE region, but you can find some really good bargains.
And it can be a great way to try out some education outside of California and spend a little less money, which I always like about community colleges. It's not so much of a commitment.
Definitely.
Financially. Well, Margo, thank you so much for joining us here today. I really appreciate your expertise on the WUI program. And we did have a show a couple months ago on WUI. And after the show, we had so many questions that I said, I think we need to get an expert in on the show to help us out and make sure we answer the questions correctly. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that wraps up another weekly show of College Smart Radio. We hope you picked up some new information today that helps you figure out ways to manage the runaway costs of college. You can hear us each week here on KDOW 1220 AM, Saturdays at 3 p.m. We promise to bring you up-to-date information from the front lines of helping parents deal with the most expensive years of their lives. For a link to a podcast of this show and our prior weekly show, go to our website, collegesmartradio.com. In addition to the podcast, you'll also find a schedule of our upcoming shows. Make sure you print out or bring up on your tablet our glossary of college planning terms for reference during our future shows. It's a complicated topic to navigate, and without knowing the terms, it's easy to get lost. Also plan on joining us at one of our upcoming Westface College Planning workshops and webinars. You can do so from the show's website, collegesmartradio.com. This is Beatrice Schultz. Thanks for tuning in to College Smart Radio. We look forward to sharing more helpful information with you next week.
You've been listening to College Smart Radio with Mark Guthrie and Beatrice Schultz. If you have questions on today's topic, log on to collegesmartradio.com or call area code 650-587-1559. That's 650-587-1559. And join us next week at this time for another edition of College Smart Radio on AM 1220 KDOW.
Information presented during today's show is not to be construed as advice meeting the particular needs of any investor. All mention of performance is based on historical experience. It should not be assumed that past performance is any indication of future results. Tax Center legal advice is not offered by Mark Guthrie or Beatrice Schultz. Please consult your tax professional for additional guidance regarding tax-related matters. Mark Guthrie and Beatrice Schultz are owners and investor advisor representatives of Westface Financial Advisory. College planning services offered through Westface College Planning. Insurance services services offered through West Face Financial and Insurance Services. License number OF 35251. Financial planning and investment advisory services offered through West Face Financial Advisory.